Why am I not having, here we go. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Hi, everyone. My name is Roma Matat. I've been a librarian for almost 30 years. I started off as a children's librarian, working in the public area. And then from there, I went on to get like a degree in computer science. I worked as a systems librarian. I've been an assistant director of a public library. I've worked as a systems librarian over at the Pioneer Library System, taking care of their public library system. Then I got my teaching degree and I became a school librarian. So I've kind of done a little bit of everything and coming around full circle in my career. So I'm really excited to be with you here today just to share with you some of the information that I've kind of gained along the way about using visual representations of information. So I'm a person who actually thinks in pictures. So for me, infographics was like the light going off. It was really exciting because I started to see it on the screen, what I sort of see in my head. And I found out that it's actually really useful for a lot of people to start to communicate our information visually as opposed to using a lot of words and numbers. So this is sort of what I've been doing for the past, I'd say I've been working on this for about the past 7 years or so. And so I've got some tips and tricks that you can use. I will pause periodically and you can ask any questions that you might have. So let's go ahead and get started. So one of the things that I'm hoping you'll get out of this workshop is just some ideas of how to represent your information in a different way so that you're more effective. As we all know, the climate can be kind of difficult to raise money, get support in the community, so on and so forth. And sometimes just sharing your message in just the right way is really effective in getting what you need for your library and its program. So there is a Padlet that I have with a bunch of resources, like they're examples of some of the infographics that I've created over the years. So feel free to look at those and use them as examples or ideas, anything that you need to, it's there. And that QR code you can use as well if you need to. So I want to start by talking about what is an infographic exactly. And so I kind of touched on it earlier, but really it's a collection of imagery and charts and just a teensy bit of text that gives an overall message that you're trying to deliver. So I have here on the other side an example of one of my monthly reports that I did when I worked over at Sherburne-Earlville School District. And it just was a graphical representation of what was going on in my library. And it was trying to make it seem more engaging, particularly for, not just for my principals, but also for the board members and the community members, because a lot of times they have no idea what we do. So this was a good way for them to see how we're actually engaging and interacting with our community and our patrons. Information can actually be visualized in several different ways. So I just wanted to briefly touch on that. And you see that anywhere. It's not just infographics. It's in nonfiction books. It's on television and social media and so forth. So the representation of information graphically has been around since the cavemen. It's not anything new. But there are some categories when you start thinking about information that can help you design your infographic. So this is just a little smattering, but you have chronological where your information is like a timeline. So maybe you have an upcoming capital project or a construction project that you're working on. So you might need to do an infographic that explains the timeline, right? It could be something that's alphabetical. Maybe it's like a list of programs that you offer in your library that you want to do. It could be something geographic. If you're talking about like a scavenger hunt or something like that, you can do an infographic for that. Categories, obviously, statistical information about your circulation, that would be considered categorical. And then hierarchy would be like if you're trying to show the relationship between different entities, like say you're talking about like how the governing body works in your library. So infographics isn't really just for monthly reports, although that's sort of what I'm touching on a lot today. But you can really start to think about communicating with your patrons and your community just about on anything using infographics and graphical information. So really briefly, I'm going to go show you some types of infographics. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's kind of in depth, but there are various types that when you look at your information that you have, you might be able to easily say, oh yeah, I'm looking for that kind. So this is what we consider to be a mixed chart. It's basically a lot of number information, but it's illustrated in a graphical way. So like, for example, if you look at the bottom left of your screen where it has the number of public library books that were circulated, I mean, they kind of used an interesting way to show the numbers. So that's sort of what you're looking at when you're doing an infographic. You don't want it to just be, graphs and charts and things like that. You want to start using some other ways to represent that information. But it's a nice way to break up all the numbers so that it's visually appealing. You also have informational lists. So again, this is a couple ones that I've created on diverse reads or netiquette tips. So it's just basically mostly text, but you've got a lot of graphics in there to make it interesting. You're taking people on a journey. And it's, just like a fun way to look at that information. You've got timelines. I think I already talked about that. Like if you're doing your capital projects or your construction projects, that might be a really nice way to visualize the timeline for people. How-tos is another example. So I have one here on how to do a diversity audit that I created when I was doing a lot of training on that. So think about infographics in terms of conveying information other than numbers. And then there's process. So this is if you have it, if then do this, then that type of a thing. So we had something on like copyright. And so we're trying to show people when you could show a film and when you couldn't show a film. And the infographic was really the best way to kind of show that. You have comparison. So if you want to like show how things were used from year to year or from patron to type of patron to type of patron, you can represent the information that way as well. And again, I'm going through this really quickly, just we'll go in more depth, but there's also location. So this is kind of like a fun thing. And I have pictures of maps on this, but you can do it with your library. Like you could actually have a picture of your library and show where the vast majority of your circulation is occurring. Maybe it's in graphical novels, or maybe it's in, true crime or wherever it is. But you could actually do that and put that in your infographic. It would be an interesting way to show how your information is actually, or how your collection is being used. Of course, then there's single chart. I wanted to point this out because this is a really interesting way to demonstrate the numbers, but without using it in a standard bar chart. So they're using it as books. And if you kind of notice, the bigger the book or the taller the book is like the larger the number of that it's trying to represent. So that's kind of a really quick visual way to show. And you can create these single charts and put them in your infographic, which is kind of cool too. So, and it's just an interesting way to kind of look at it, look at the information. And then there's visualized numbers, where this is when it's basically you're just doing stats, right? And you just really want to make it an eye-catching, easy on the eyes, quick to pick out the pertinent parts of information. And so that's what you're really doing here. So. And then there's visualized numbers. And this is where it's a little bit more, the numbers are actually more significantly important. So, right, if you look here, the percentages are actually really big. So that's the important part of the infographic. And it just helps make that information just pop. Okay, and then anatomical is just explaining different parts of like a procedure and an organization or things like that. Okay, so those are all the different types, and I know that was a whirlwind. You can go back and look at those more specific, more closely. But what I wanted to, let me stop. Does anybody have any questions? Because I know I ran through that really quickly, but I just wanted to show you some examples so you knew what we were talking about. Any questions, or we're good to go? Oh, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
One question was, someone was curious what software you use to make those. I think we're going to get into the different options here.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to show you. I'll show you the one that I used to use something called Easily, but now I really love Canva. Canva is the one that I'm my go-to. I do sometimes do things in Adobe Photoshop, but mostly Canva is come so far that you can use it for everything. And I'll show that to you a little bit. That's a good question, because not all programs are the same. And so you want to use one that's going to help you the most. So Canva is pretty simple. Is there anything else?
That's the only one that
Okay.
fits right now. Thank you.
Yay.
Please continue.
Okay. And yeah, and I apologize. I went through that so fast, but I didn't want to spend too much time on that because you can go back and look at them. But I did want to give you an idea of all the different types of infographics that there are out there. So let's get into what makes a good infographic. So on the right-hand side, you see an infographic that I created for a weeding project. So I came to the Norwich City School District and the collection was really outdated. I did an analysis and the average age was like, I don't know, like 1999 or something like that. And about 60% needed to be removed. And I knew that, if I just came in here and just discarded like 60 to 70% of the books, there'd be a huge uproar. So I wanted to kind of have a good offense in terms of like preparing the community and my teachers for this change. And so I created this infographic on weeding. So that they not only would understand that what I was doing was based on information and facts, but also that I was using guidelines that are accepted and used across the state and are recommended nationally in terms of taking care of a library collection. So I created this infographic, and when I did it, I wanted it to be fun and bubbly and like inviting and, kind of like cheery. So that's sort of why I picked like some of the colors and the graphics. I actually picked a template. So it's not like I created this all myself. It was a template that I updated. But when I was looking for it, that's sort of what I was looking for, right? Is something that would convey that message. And that's one of the important things when you're doing an infographic is really to have an idea of who's your audience and what do you want them to walk away with? Like what is the mountain you're trying to climb, right? What are you trying to accomplish? And then pick the elements that make that happen. So it sends one key message, right? So obvious when you look at this, it's weeding, right? That's my message. Like, okay, here's the elephant in the room. We're going to talk about this. One key message. This is what we're talking about. And it has a practical or a new angle, right? So the idea is you don't want to you don't want to have too many avenues or too many roads that you're trying to travel down when you're doing an infographic. You really want it to be a single directive, clear mission that you're trying to accomplish. When you try to do too many things, it really muddies the water, just like anything, right? If you're writing anything or publishing anything, you want it to be very direct. But in graphics, because you're replacing words with images, it becomes really, really important because if you don't have a clear vision of what you're trying to say, it makes it hard for other people to visualize it. And of course, always accurate and researched, well researched. I don't have to tell you all that because you're all libraries, work in libraries, or librarians work in libraries. You know how important that really is. But it also needs to tell a story, right? It needs to be something that gets their interest, that like is fit for your audience, is something that they're interested in, right? If the example that I had on the other page, I was giving it to teachers. So I knew if I had it had like a little paper clip and some cute little flowers and whatever, it'd be reminiscent of some of the teacher pay teacher things that they use. And so I was kind of going for that feeling that they might have. You want it to be visually appealing and also well structured. So this example that I have is a monthly report that I gave when I worked at the Tilton School. And I just wanted a really quick report that people could see what was going on in my library. Now, it was a very small school. We had it was a special ed school. We had about 80 students. So my circulation numbers aren't up there, but it was a really good representation of what was going on. And it went to their board and the community, to our fundraising and things like that. And so it was a very quick and easy thing for like our director to pull out and say, hey, we're trying to fund the library. Here's what's been going on. And it just got people engaged. But you also want it to be short and sweet, right? You don't want it to be heavy on the text. You don't want it to have to be very verbose, because that kind of defeats the purpose of an infographic, right? The other thing is that your eyes should go on a journey. So one of the things you're trying to do is kind of make it like a path. Like, I don't know they're talking about this in terms of like redesigning libraries too, right? That everything is a journey, right? So when you organize your shelves, instead of making them straight back and forth, you want it to be something that a patron's going to kind of like walk along, so that they see things that are of interest to them. It's the same idea with an infographic, right? You kind of want their eyes to travel through the whole document and kind of pick up the information as they go. And so that's one of the things you want to keep in mind. If you look at this one here, you can see that it's actually a different version of the one that I did earlier on weeding. So you can, when you find one that you like, you can reuse it and just change the colors and things like that. So once you do this for a while, you'll have your go-to like infographic templates that you like to use, and it's just a matter of changing things up. And it looks different enough that people aren't going to realize it's the same one unless you point it out to them. But that's one of the nice things too about using a program like Canva, is that you can do that kind of thing, and you can really get more mileage out of your time. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you really want to think about your story. You know, who's your audience? What is it you're trying to accomplish? When does it need to happen by? And how is it going to happen? So think about it. It's kind of like writing a persuasive essay, right? That's the way I kind of equate doing an infographic, is that you're really just trying to figure that out. So what you say and what you actually mean are like two different things, right? So you're really trying to get across a message without being direct and saying, hey, we need money, right? You're trying to find another way to say that'll put their heartstrings, get their interest, so they'll be willing to like support you or do whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So what you might say in a conversation is, the library is extremely busy, right? You might say that to a board member, you might say that to a patron, but what you're really trying to say is that the library needs additional staff, right? Because you're so busy, you can't really see what's going on. You might say a large percentage of my patrons are reading ebooks, right? Okay, that's great. But what you're really trying to say is that you need more funds to buy online resources, right? So like, again, what you're trying to say and what you actually mean are really two different things. Another example is the reference service, right? It's a key service. But what you really mean is you really want to expand your hours. So what you want to do when you're first designing your infographic is thinking about it is, what is it that you really mean? What are you really trying to get out of it? Then you want to think about, who is your audience? You know, are they homeschoolers, recent graduates, job seekers? Are they kids, parents, business owners, teachers, teens, parents, staff? You know, who are they? Because you want to write it or pick the graphics for that group, right? The way you present information to the board might be totally different than you do to a parent-teacher organization. And you want to make sure that's reflected in your infographic as well. Oh, and there's just all kinds of people, right, that you can be supporting. So your goal is, what do you want the audience to do after they're done reading your infographic, right? So think about it like a thesis statement. So when you're sitting down to do this, just jot it down or put it in your mind, you know, here's my point, here's my purpose, here's what I'm trying to do. And then think about everything that you're putting in the infographic as your supporting evidence, right? In other words, something doesn't go in the infographic unless it supports that thesis statement, what it is that you're really trying to accomplish and the mission that you're trying to go towards. So the next thing you're going to do, oh, should I pause? Does anybody have any questions on that section before I go on?
I haven't seen anything on that section specifically.
Okay. Good. Okay. So the next part is, you're going to gather your data, right? And so in this case, I'm showing like some circulation data, right? That you're going to look at. There's other types of data you might pick up. You might do reader's advisory. You might have programming information, the number of library visitors, reference questions, and so on. And once you gather your data, then you want to start looking at it, and you want to start looking for like your patterns, right? Is there an increased usage? Is a certain area being less used, or you know, are you having more traffic in the evenings than before, or you know, or are reference questions suddenly going through the roof on a particular topic? You know, look for your patterns, because that might help you identify, you know, your thesis and where your purpose really is and what it is that you really need to do. So again, you look at trends and relationships and percentages and compare them. And once you kind of have that information, then you can go forward with actually trying to do your infographic. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was writing your text copy. For some people, writing a text copy really helps you form your infographics. You can do this or not, it's up to you. But sometimes it's really helpful just to write down like 3 or 4 sentences about what it is you're trying to accomplish until you do this a whole lot. So you want to make sure you have like a catchy title, right, for your infographic, so that it catches them right away. You want to make sure there's some sort of introduction, like why somebody cares. Going back to that infographic that I did on weeding, I had my catchy title, weeding, right? Well, it wasn't really catchy, but the next part was like, why do you care about this? Like our collection's really out of date. Like that's important, right? So you want to make sure you have something in there that says why is your audience going to really care about it? And then the rest of all the elements are going to be, again, supporting what you're doing in your infographic, your arguments about why it's important, the narrative, and then you're going to reinforce all of that with the graphics and all the cues and your stats and things like that. So it's kind of like, some of you are probably like, yeah, you can tell she works in a school and works with teachers because this is like learning a writing lesson, right? But it is really very similar. And to write a successful infographic, it's important to kind of go through all these things. And of course, credit any sources. If you do get information from outside of your own entity, you make sure that you credit it and say where you got it. And always keep in mind, what is the purpose? You want to always make sure, is it to teach, entertain, persuade, or inspire, right? Because there's just all those reasons that you might be doing your infographic. So the last graphic that I have here is just to show you, it's kind of like a good story, right? When you think about it, a good story follows a structure. Remember I talked about how the infographic, you always had your eyes were moving. It's the same sort of thing. When you think about the infographic, you're kind of moving through all of this structure, your exposition, the rising action, the climax, falling action, and the denouement. It's kind of like that whole arc is what you're sort of trying to do with it. Okay, so that said, writing the copy, I want to just talk a little bit about AI because AI can make your life so much easier when it's coming to writing or when it comes to writing any kind of text. I use ChatGPT, but there's all kinds of other ones out there, and you can let AI write the copy for you, which is really cool. So like if you don't want to sit down and jot those 4 or 5 sentences, just put in some notes and like just bare minimum, and it'll spit back like more elegant language. You can actually form or give it guidelines on how you want the language to be formed, and it will give you different versions. So it's really kind of cool. So, oops, I clicked on it and I lost my thing. Oh, here we go. Sorry. I didn't mean to click on it. I'm trying to go to the next slide. There we go. So write a bare bones copy. So I did this as an example, and I just said October was another busy month at the library. We circulated blah, blah months, offered how many story times, did book clubs, all of that stuff. And then I put it into ChatGPT, and all I said to it was just make it more engaging. Make it more engaging. Take this thing that I just wrote in 10 seconds and make it better. And here's what it came up with. It says October was bustling at the library. That's better than what I said, another busy month at the library. This is much better. We proudly circulated an impressive 10,354 books and hosted a wide variety of programs for all ages and so on. So, you can, if you want a copy to kind of get an idea, whether you're doing it for an infographic or anything else, ChatGPT is really cool. You can really use a lot and get a lot of good information and just catchphrases, vocabulary. Even if you don't use this, you might find a phrase that you might do. Like maybe like why your audience cares could be that the introduction could be that October was bustling at the library, right? Maybe you put that at the top of your infographic in big letters. So there's all kinds of ways that you can look at this output text and use it as you're creating this or any kind of marketing material. But just to show you a little bit more, I also then took that same text and I said, okay, now rewrite it for community members who I need them to approve my funding. And you can see it gave me 2 different suggestions, and you can look at them and decide which one you really like, and they are really different. So you can use ChatGPT for all of your PR materials, whether it's like press releases or letters to parents or community members or whatever, board members, and really cut your time down and come up with some really good information and phrases to use. And then there are some tips that I have for using ChatGPT. One thing I would say is it's a lot like doing Google. Like for anybody who's my age, you probably remember before Google, before we had the internet and when Google first was coming out, We used to teach patrons on how to search Google. You know, how do you find information? What are your key phrases? You know, how do you do and not and all that stuff? It's very similar to ChatGPT, right? This is kind of in its infancy, although it's very powerful. But it's very much the same. The more you do it, the better you get at it, right? And the more you do different types of prompting and parameters, when you ask it to come back with written text, the better your stuff is going to be. So just start using it. Even if you don't use the text it spits out, eventually you'll get to a point where you're able to interact with it and get what you need. And it's a lot, you can ask it like Google like questions, you know, like write me a press release for story time featuring bears, right? And it'll come back and it'll tell you. And you can even say for preschoolers or for, you know, toddlers or whatever, and it'll come back with different types of text. The other cool thing it can do, you don't have to say we circulated X number of books and did 10 different programs and blah, blah, blah. You can actually give it lists of information. So it doesn't even have to be complete sentences. So that's kind of nice, and makes it very easy for you. It's also a great sounding board. I was saying earlier that like my writing style is very clipped and very direct and to the point. It doesn't come across really friendly. So I tend to use ChatGPT for here's what I want to say, make it friendlier, you know, and it comes back much more friendly, much more inviting. And then I use that. So it's really nice that way, especially if you're like me and like not very good at being fuzzy and warm. It really helps you with that kind of thing. But it will give you feedback and pointers, and I'm learning like phrases to use that I never thought of using before. So now I just adopt those into my own writing. So it's really kind of been a writing coach for me. But you can also do limitation parameters, right? Like what's really cool is you can say, okay, like I work with all ages, right? So I can say, okay, write a program description for third graders, you know, and then I can say, okay, now write a program description for 10th graders with like, that's going to happen on these dates at these times. And I'll get two different examples and very different language. One that's going to be easily read by third graders and understand it or be able to be understood by third graders and of interest to them. And, you know, something that's much more higher level for high schoolers. So again, you can do that whether you're, you know, you can say for parents versus, you know, for business leaders. You would obviously have different vocabulary in there because you're talking about different things that are of interest to them. And ChatGPT is really good at helping you find that information. So I just wanted to point that out and just like, you know, say, don't be afraid of it. Just start using it. You know, it really can make your life easier. I wondered if I should ask if anybody has any questions at this point before I keep going or.
No questions yet. We have a few that I would like to save for the end when we have enough time to properly get into it. So let's just go ahead and finish the
Keep going.
presentation
Okay.
and then we'll have plenty of time at the end.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
once you've got kind of your overall mission, and your audience determined, you have your information together. The next thing you're going to start doing is looking at like the elements of design. And what I would really recommend here is look at your templates that are available to you in whatever program you're using, and pick one that kind of matches what you're trying to represent, right? So if you are trying to do like an annual report, you might want to pick one that says it's a monthly report, right? But if you're actually trying to do one that's, you know, talking about what's one here, like challenges and things that are going on that's a little bit more informational, you might want to pick like one that's about public school challenges that are happening today, right? That example. So pick one that you A, like, but also B is sort of mirrors the information that you have or what you're trying to get across. I use Canva, and they have like a really great search engine. So you can browse their infographic categories, and you can drill down to like the color you want to use, you know, your audience. There's all kinds of like parameters that you can say that you can pick from. They also have different formats. So you can have a publication, social media posts, like documents, flyers, posters, like everything. You can design logos, you can do all kinds of things. And one thing I didn't mention earlier is infographics typically are not a standard 8.5 by 11. They're usually meant to be shared online. So when you are designing your infographic, you do want to keep that in mind. Like, is it something you want to print out and give to people, or is it something you're going to mail? Or are you going to, or email, or are you going to post it on social media? Which social media platform are you planning on using? Because some of them have different sizes that they like or different layouts. So Canva, I like Canva. And they actually have different templates based on the media that you're planning on sharing your information with. So it's a good idea to kind of have that in mind as well. You can also search specifically if you're looking for statistical infographics, like you can actually search with these two terms here and you'll get the most variety. That's what I found worked the best. So I just wanted to share that with you. And you can see there's all kinds of different information that is being shared in different ways. Some have bar charts, some have pie charts, you know, and some of them do the number driven ones. So there's just all different ways that you can actually share your information. The other thing you want to think about is your color. And there's like something we call the psychology of color, but color innately, because of all the media we consume, we automatically associate certain colors with different things. So for example, like red is like excitement and bold. And that's why, you know, McDonald's is the red M, and Target and Lego and all that. They picked that color particularly when they developed their logo because it was so important. So even though you might really be partial to green, like me, I love green. Green is like my favorite color. It usually means like peace and calm and things like that. So if you're really trying to like drum up support, it may not be the best color to go with. This is usually something that people aren't aware that that's what they associate the color with, but it's something that does happen. So you want to kind of be aware of it in the background. Also, you want to pick a color palette. Some people are really good at picking colors that go together, but there are a lot of tools out there that you can use that will pick them for you. So if you are like me and just want to like get some ideas, this is a website that's really good of giving you some color suggestions, palette suggestions, so that you kind of use the same color everywhere that you go. And then here are some other sites that are also very helpful. In particular, the HTML color codes that will actually give you the computer number for the code for the color. So if you have something that you're using that it needs that actual number, it can help you translate that. So that's kind of helpful there. Canva also, I should mention Canva, and I keep stumping Canva, but that also has color palettes that you can pick from too. So in that program, it can help you share, you can help find information there. You can also jazz it up with graphs. They have an entire graphing section that will actually create the graph for you. So you don't have to create it like in Excel or Sheets or anything like that and copy it and paste it over. You just put the information in the table. When you're editing the data, you can actually copy data right from Excel and put it right into the table in Canva, and it'll automatically fill out the graph for you. So that's a really nice feature. And they have a lot of different types of graphs that you can use. So I would recommend that as well. In terms of like if you're doing any kind of graphs, just to use a program that has some graphing capabilities in it. Okay, and then the other thing is you want to sort of replace text with icons, right? So instead of saying that Ms. Spellman circulated 450 books and Diger did 337, I did it as an actual a bookcase with the number of books, right? And so it's just kind of a graphical way of representing information that's just more interesting for people to look at and to peruse. So, but always keep your graphic style the same. If you're going to use one, like if you look at some graphic pictures, they might be like watercolor-ish. You don't want to mix that with something like this that's more solid colors because it's very jarring and it's very obvious to the page or the person who's reading it that it's not the same graphical style. So always try to pick the same images that have the same color palette and the same like artistic style, if you will. But above all else, just keep it simple. That's like the most important thing that you can do. It's just, and all, you know, especially with infographics, you always want it to be really, really simple. Okay, font does matter. You want to keep your fonts to the minimum. Don't go crazy and use 6 different fonts. When I first started doing this, I was like, this font's really neat and that font's really neat, but it just was like a mess. So, pick 2 fonts, 2, maybe 3. And if you need help figuring out what fonts might go together, there are a lot of whoops, I keep doing that. My apologies to you. I keep, and hold on. And I can't get that to go away. I apologize. The thing is up here and I'm trying, there we go. There we go. Sorry about that. I keep clicking on it and it keeps going. My apologies. And it also will give you some things that are ideas of which fonts to use together, right? So if you're having trouble figuring out what 2 fonts might look good together, that can help you out, help you pick out quite a few. Again, here are some sites that'll give you information about pairing. So if you find a font that you really, really like, you can say, okay, I want to use this font. What fonts go with it? And it'll tell you some suggestions and you can try using those. So that's kind of nice too. Canva also has some suggestions, and here's how you can get to it in Canva. And it just tells you, or just gives you the examples and you can apply it to your actual worksheet. So that's kind of nice. Again, Canva is really easy. So that's pretty much in a nutshell, like how you create an infographic. If you need some more in-depth information or more tutorials, I recommend these 2 sites here on how to create clutter-free and just a step-by-step instruction. Once you start doing it, it really does get a lot easier, but there's in-depth information out there if you want it. The infographic programs that I've used in the past, here are some suggestions. Canva is very inexpensive. I was looking to see for like public libraries, they do have like a reduced cost option. So that might be something to look into for your organization if you're thinking of doing it. For education, it's free. So that's one of the other reasons I use it. I like Easily in terms of creating individual images, but I find editing and manipulating it just much more difficult. So Canva is by far my favorite. Just some final tips, and then I'll let you get to questions. When you first start, I wouldn't recommend starting with, oh, I need to get this infographic out to my community like tomorrow. I got to get it done. Pick something that's fun and low stakes, right, for your first time. So maybe you have a birthday party coming up, right? So design a birthday invitation, something that's going to be fun for you to do and easy, just to get you used to the program, used to design. Think about some of those elements that I've mentioned in this program. Just to kind of get your feet wet. Then dive into the one that you really need to get done. But if you start with something that's a little more fun, I think you'll get less frustrated with the idea of making infographics. Always when you are doing your infographic, before you start making major changes to the template that you pick, or if you have a version that you kind of like, just always duplicate it so that you have a copy somewhere else. So in case you do something catastrophic and you just want to go back to the original one that you have it there and you can actually pull from it. The other thing I would say is, don't get lost down a rabbit hole looking for the perfect font or the perfect color or the perfect image, right? This happens to me so often, right? I'm like, no, page down. Nope, I don't like any of those. Page down. The next thing I know, I've spent like 20 minutes looking for the perfect image and like, I need to have this done. So what I would say is, anything that as you're looking for the images or the colors or stuff like that, anything you think might work, paste a copy of it or paste, a version of it into a blank document in your infographic project. That way you have it there and you can always go back and pull it. Because sometimes what happens is you go down like 4 or 5 pages and you're like, well, I like that one that was on page 2. Now you got to scroll up and find that. Where if you pick it, put it in like a holding area, if you will, then you have it there and you can always just delete it when you're done with your project if you don't use it. And then the other thing I do too is I set a timer, right? Like, I mean, it sounds dumb, but I'm like, okay, I can spend maybe 5 minutes looking for this image, but if I don't find what I need, I have to pick like whatever I found that was best. if you have time at the end, you can always go back and go, "Oh, I really didn't like that image. Let me see what else I can find." But then that way you don't get lost down this rabbit hole because you really can. I've spent a lot of time on these infographics, probably more time than anybody ever looked at them, when I add up every single person who saw them. And it's just not worth that. I mean, it's important to pick the right graphic. It's important to use the right elements, have your eyes go on this journey, but it's not like the end all or be all if it's not perfect, right? So I really recommend that. And then the other thing that I might say is, there's nothing wrong with you coming up with your thesis statement, your catchy title, what you want your story to be, and then, giving all the statistical information to someone else and saying, "Hey, do you want to create this for me?" You might have someone on your staff that loves doing this or, wants to learn how to do this or what have you. I mean, it can be a team effort. You don't have to do it from start to finish, right? It can be something that you start and maybe there's somebody out there that really loves it and has more time or whatever. So I'd say lean on them or, and work with them because sometimes that's easier, right? We often don't ask for help, but sometimes it's the best thing to do. So. All right, so I just wanted to thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know I went over a lot of information. So it's there if you need it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help you. I love this stuff, so I love seeing what other people do. I'm going to go
Thank
ahead and stop share if that's okay. There you go.
Thank you so much. We do have some questions that have come through. Two of them relate to accessibility standards for infographics shared online or digitally. Do you have any tips for addressing accessibility within infographics while keeping aesthetic appeal? Do you have any experience with creating infographics that can be uh, read through screen readers or similar
Yeah.
tools?
Actually, okay, so it's interesting because when I worked with Project Look Sharp and I helped them create like some infographics for some of the stuff they were doing in terms of working with schools, that actually came up a lot. And the truth is that it's the colors and thing and the fonts that are easily read are not necessarily what's in eye-catching, I guess is what I would say. So in the end, we opted for doing what was more visually, and then we created like a separate document that was easier for someone to read. So I guess in the end, I hope I'm saying this the right way, but what we ended up doing is kind of doing like two different products because there just wasn't, I couldn't figure out a way to meet the standards and so that it was easily readable for anyone who had vision, what do you call it, differently abled in terms of being their vision. So yeah, that is one of the things. And I don't know what the answer is to that. So I have not created a lot of infographics specifically for that audience. That's actually I would love to learn more about that. So if there's somebody out there who's got to do that, let's get together because I think that if you can help me because I really tried. It's a really good question.
Thank you. Yeah, if anybody has any suggestions on this topic, please feel free to add them to the chat. And I'll also take a look after today's webinar and see if there's any information we can include in the follow-up email on this topic.
Yeah, no, I'm there. Yeah, I think it's a great thing to be aware of, and I think we need to figure it out. I just haven't figured it out.
Next question. You talked quite a bit about different templates available on Canva and other tools. Can you make a template for yourself to use from scratch, or do you make templates yourself?
Yeah, you absolutely can in Canva. It's super easy. Like just so I have this library club and I had so many kids sign up, I had to divide it into two groups. So I had to create a template invitation, some that were going to be for this fall and some that were going to be for January. And it was super easy. I made one template and then I just made a few changes like colors and a few graphics, and I was able to use the same thing both ways. So absolutely, you can create your own templates. I can, and actually a lot of times what I do is when I have an infographic, I will pull up one I've done in the past and I edit it and I reuse it, which is essentially the same thing. So yeah, absolutely. If you want, I can pull up my Canva and I can show you if you guys want to see any of them, but it's super easy. Canva makes it so easy to do. Oh, I think you're muted again.
Jen, you're muted.
Sorry, everybody. Are you available for questions in the future? Should we find ourselves in a pickle?
Oh, absolutely. Please reach out. I love doing this stuff, so I'm more than happy. And I'd love to see what people create. So it's a journey. It's not an end all. So absolutely, I'd love to see. Please contact me.
I don't see any more at this time, but I do have one question. And I know you did touch on this, but I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on how you go about finding different ways or the best way to put into a visualization your text copy. How do you decide if you want to go with a graph or if you
Yeah.
want to do something else to show a percentage? I know you shared quite a lot of examples in the beginning, so I don't know if it's easier to kind of walk through one of those
Yeah.
examples. But I think that would be really helpful for our attendees, just for, getting
Just to see
started
it.
with this. Yeah,
Yeah. Let's see. Do you want, so I can, I'm just gonna take it back or share again if that's okay. Um,
absolutely.
so if I go back, I'll just do one example that I have here. And then I think I'll show you Canva if you guys have time. I'll just kind of show you what I do. Sorry, I'm going back the old fashioned way. This is like dumb. I'm sorry. I should just like, let's see here. Let me do it this way. Oh my goodness. I'm having all kinds of trouble now. Hold on. I'm drawing on it for some reason. There we go. Let me get out of that. All right. Let me see here. No, that's not what I'm gonna do. My Lord. All right, I'm just gonna make this way. My apologies. They just updated my computer, so it's like everything's different. So I'm trying to think here which one would be the best one to look at. Okay, so like if I look at this one here, and actually back even further, I apologize that I'm doing this. This is bad. Let me go to the Padlet here. So in the Padlet, I have like a bunch of different examples. So if we look at this one here, this weeding one that I did, one of the things that I talked about a little bit, right? So I knew I wanted to talk about weeding, right? And what were the parameters, what was involved in that. But I also wanted them to know that I'm not just making this stuff up, right? That there's a reason why I do it. So I just left the title weeding because I think that's shocking enough for a lot of people. I think weeding is one of those things that most people get really uncomfortable with. So I used that as my catchy title because I thought that was enough. I didn't really have to say anything more than that. And then below that, I put down where my guidelines were so that they would know that there's like legitimate reasons and authorities out there, like authoritative sources that are supporting this idea. And then when I was looking at my information, I was like, okay, I could tell them that, the average age, or I could tell them how many percentages, what percentage of the books really needed to be removed. And when I looked at that, I thought, well, if I tell them the average age is like 1999, they're probably going to be like, well, that's not that bad. I mean, I graduated from college in 1990, so, whatever, that the information's still good. And I thought that was a little bit more debatable of a fact, I guess I would say, than just telling them, hey, 60% is aged and needs updating. Because then I thought, okay, there's a lot of reasons why something needs to be updated. It isn't just that it was published in 1999, right? It could be like if you look at like some of the stuff that we've learned like about African American history, for example, like the riots in Tulsa, that was not really part and I want to say it was not really in the forefront of anyone's minds, although it happened, but it's not really something that we taught like in schools up until probably about like 6, 7, 8 years ago, maybe. And so when you look at like history books and things like that, a lot of times that information was not necessarily included. So even though that information is not necessarily bad, if it was published in 1990, we need more updated information. So it includes that information. So I didn't want to get into those little fine things. So I just kind of said, look, our 60% is aged. And I made the number 60 really big because I wanted them to come away with the idea that that's more than half of these books that have to go, right? So that they're kind of preparing them. So I was kind of like stepping them through all of that. And trying to get them to see it. And then I basically just said that, based on this criteria, this is how I'm going to be replacing them. And then I started, listing removal by copyright date, and then I did the musty thing, right? One thing that I did as a mistake, and you'll do this as you do an infographic, I made the assumption that people know the Dewey Decimal System, but they kind of don't. So what I should have done is said, the history section is this much out of date, and the whatever. And just instead of using the Dewey Decimal number system, I should have put in the actual category so that it made more sense to people, because they don't know that, science and technology is in 500 and 600 unless they read it. So that was a mistake that I made when I did the infographic, but it's effective anyway. I mean, it worked. And then I did the musty, which is another thing that you're all familiar with. And when I was doing this, I chose to use 2 different colors to try to highlight what I wanted them to see. So like in the removing by copyright date, I did the numbers 2 to 10, and all the other years, the criteria, I guess you should say, I wanted that to be a bright color because that really was what was important, not necessarily the numbers, because I wanted them to walk away with the idea that really the information in our library shouldn't be really older than 10 years for the most part, right? It should be like earlier. And so that's what I kind of wanted them to walk away with. And if you look, it's like 2 to 10, 10, 2 to 10, 5 to 10, so that's really repeated over and over again. And then of course with the is it musty? In this case, I chose to make the musty words the bright color because that's the important part that I wanted them, is it misleading? Is it ugly? Is it superseded? Like that's what I wanted them to walk away with. But then if they need additional information, it's there in black. I think the other thing I said was this is for teachers. So I used a template. This is a template that had, paper clips and looks like sticky notes and notepads and whatever, and like stickers and things like that. And it's a bright color because I thought that kind of represented, what teachers have on their desks, or, they're doing notes or grading or things like that. So that's what I sort of tried to stick with. So that's what I was sort of going with when I created this. Does that make more sense? Like, does that make sense to people?
Yes, that
Or
was
does people
really
have,
helpful. Thank you.
yeah. Do you want me to show you Canva? Like I can show you like really quickly, like how you can pick a template and walk through
We
it.
actually did get another question in,
Oh,
two
sure.
actually. Let's see quick here. So one question about Canva. Are you using the free version or a premium paid
So
version?
I use education, and so I believe it's premium. I did purchase for myself a premium subscription, and the reason I would recommend that is that you have so many more access to graphics, so you have a lot more possibilities that you can do. So I would recommend, if you can afford it, to do the upgraded subscription. You just have so many more options. So yeah. I think education, we automatically, either they have it's almost premium if it isn't premium, but it has a lot of variety to it.
Thank you. A question regarding assessment. How do you assess the success of your infographics? Do you monitor the success of your infographics?
That's actually a really good question. I think because it takes time, right? So you always want to figure out, is it useful or not? Or how useful is it, right? The amount of time that you're spending on it. I think, like in terms of this weeding project that I did, I think it was successful in that it was an easy thing for my administration to pull out and share with community members when they had questions, because I mean, certainly there were organizations, like the local YMCA was very concerned that we were weeding so much. I had board members that were concerned. And so when they started asking questions, in fact, I think it even came up at a board meeting, my director was able to like pull out this infographic and send it to all of them, so they suddenly understood, why I was doing it and what I was doing it, and they could absorb it very quickly at a board meeting. So yeah, I think that, I mean, did it prevent people from questioning or getting upset? No, not necessarily, but it was good support and backup were when people did. Like I was not at the board meeting where it came up. And if I didn't have this document and if I hadn't given it to my director, I think that whole meeting would have gone so much more the wrong way. Because I think they would have really said, put those books back on the shelf. But because I had this and I had the evidence and, all of these criteria backing me up, and it was in a form that they could actually digest, I think that made it successful. Are there some that aren't successful? Yeah, like the one that I showed you of the copyright where I did the, let me see if I can find it really quickly. Is it in here? I thought it was in here. Trying to see if I can find it. Print, nope, that's print versus Saturday stats, meetings, Connecticut, nope, infographic. I might have to go back to my spreadsheet here, or my source here. The one that I did, that showed you the copyright, where it was like, if you can show the movie in the school, if it's this, but if it's not, let me see if I can exit out of here and there we
Oh, the
go.
flow chart.
The flow chart. Yes,
Yes.
that's the one. This one here. Let me do view here. Sorry. There we go. This one I did, and I was trying to make something that's very complicated, simple. But it was too complicated and it didn't really work, I'll be honest. Like people were like, had more questions than ever, because they couldn't really follow the flow chart. So I don't know. So sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not. It just depends. And sometimes it depends on my audience too, right? Like this, to a bunch of librarians, this was very successful. But when they gave that out to their teachers, it was not. So it just depends on the audience. And you just have to think about, sometimes the information, when you put it together, it works one way, but it doesn't work the other, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And our last question for today, have you used infographics to train new staff on technology or procedures or anything internal to broaden it out?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Yes, actually. I have a bunch of new staff here in the district right now. They're working in the libraries, and in our automation system, I absolutely do use infographics. I also have a degree in computer science, and one of my first jobs was doing documentation. And so I wrote a lot of documentation, did a lot of testing, and one thing I learned really quickly is that graphics are the best way to like show anybody how to do something, or how to show them procedurally what to do. And so when I do write up documentation, like, here's how you mark a book lost, I always try to make it, simple, direct, not a lot of text, pictures of like exactly what they're gonna see. And so, yeah, it's really is like an infographic that they can use. Plus, the nice thing is I did it as a bunch of like slides so that I could index them all. And then it's kind of like a little mini booklet. And then if they want to know how to do this, they click here and they just get to it. And it kind of works like an electronic book, so to speak. But yeah, you can absolutely do that. I would highly recommend it.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Well, that is the rest of our questions for today. But if anyone has other questions they think of, please feel free to email me, Jessica, Roma. We will try to include it in the follow-up email. Everyone who attended and registered will receive a copy of the recording as soon as it is processed. I did share a link to your certificate of attendance request in the chat. And a link to our follow-up survey. If you get a chance to complete it, please do. We really value your feedback as we put together additional programming. Thank you again, Roma. This was wonderful.
Sure. Yeah,
And
no problem. Yeah.
I will go ahead and end the recording.
Bye. Thank you very much.